the founder of psychoanalysis is Sigmund Freud, and he's given the credit as the father of psychology. So he is the one who established the principles of this theory. As you know, every theory comes from one field of knowledge, which is often non-literary. So Plato derived his theory from ethics. Aristotle derived his theory from the medical science. And Longinus, both Longinus and Horace based their theories on aesthetics, which is a branch of philosophy. This theory, the psychoanalytical theory, is based on psychology. So what is actually psychology? We have to know the meaning of the term before we start with the theory. It's actually made of two words, psyche, which means mind. It also means soul, mind or soul. Logi means science. So it's the science of the mind, or it's the study of the mind. That's the meaning of the word psychology in Latin. It discusses, it concerns itself with human behavior, why people do what they do, and human conduct and feelings and emotions and everything, in fact, that goes on in the human mind. But remember, it's not concerned with the brain itself as a physical entity. It's concerned with the mind, not the brain. There's a difference. So if somebody bumps their head on a wall and there's a fracture in their skull, they don't go to a psychologist. They go to a phrenologist. Now, phrenology is different from psychology. It's concerned with the brain itself as a physical entity. Psychology is not concerned with the brain, although it's related to it, but it's more concerned with behavior, what goes on in our brain, not the physical aspect of the brain. And was there psychology before Freud? Of course, we're talking when we say Freud, we are referring to the beginning of the 20th century. The beginning of the 20th century. This means 100 years, almost 100 years ago. So before Freud means before the 20th century. So when I say before Freud, it means before the 20th century. The question is, was there psychology before Freud? No. There was no psychology as a science. The human mind was not examined before Freud. But people used to call it human nature. They used to say this is a human nature. Because they didn't study the mind scientifically, so they often referred to it as human nature. The most important thing in Freud's theory is the idea of the unconscious. So Freud's main contribution is the concept of the unconscious. Now, the unconscious mind, we call it the unconscious mind, or shortly, the unconscious. It is the place where all our motives, instincts, drives, past experiences, everything is stored there. That's what we mean. It's just imagine the unconscious like a big store or a warehouse where you save all the items you have. You put in a warehouse all the items you've got. So you store them there. So that's the unconscious. Processes, mental images, memories, past experiences, ideas, concepts, what we learn from experience, from life, and everything is stored there in the unconscious. And it's different from the conscious mind. Before Freud, people knew what the conscious mind is, but Freud came up with the idea of the unconscious, which is new, and that's his main contribution. Well, Freud proved that there are many things about ourselves we don't know. So before Freud, people knew, like, what are you doing? You say, I'm eating, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why are you doing this? Why are you eating? Because I'm hungry. Why are you drinking water? Because I'm thirsty. Freud proved that there are many times when we don't know really why we are doing something. We think we know, but in fact, that's not the real reason. So Freud says there are many things in life. There are many things you do in life, and you think you are doing them for a particular reason, but that's not really the real reason. This is a false reason. The real reason is hidden in your unconscious mind. And these are hidden motives that are controlling your behavior, and you don't know it. You don't know. You think the reason is A, but the reason is B, and you don't know about it. So you don't even know yourself. This is what's shocking about Freud's theory. Freud proved to people that they don't even know themselves. And this means that there are this means that our unconscious is controlling our behavior. We are not really the masters of our behavior. We are not really the masters of our life. What determines our life and our behavior is the unconscious, our unconscious. We are merely puppets in the hands of our unconscious mind. And we unconsciously, hide behind masks. These masks are designed to hide us from ourselves. Before Freud, there was only one mask, the social mask. People used to hide from society. People had masks to hide themselves from others, from other people. And this was called like dishonesty, hypocrisy, social hypocrisy. Like you do something, but you deny it. Uh, you don't tell people the truth about yourself. This means you pretend that you are good, but in fact you're bad. This is a social mask. People use it to hide themselves from society. So, well, this was already known before Freud, but Freud said there's another mask, a personal, not a social mask, but a personal mask. We use this mask not to hide from others. We use it to hide from ourselves because we don't want to see the truth about ourselves. We don't want to face our true personality, our true nature. So we use this mask to hide from ourselves. This is a new idea. I mean, this is, by the way, this is not a new idea now, but 100 years ago, when Freud came up with his theory, it was at that time new and difficult to understand, and also shocking. People didn't expect this from, didn't expect these ideas. This means that there are hidden motives behind our actions. We don't know why we are doing the things we do, or we think we know, but in fact we are wrong, because there are hidden drives and motives and instincts that control us. So in order to understand ourselves better, in order to understand the cause of our behavior, we have to dig deep into our unconscious and find the true, real reason for our behavior. Only if we do that, we really know ourselves better. So it's just like, if you don't know the real cause, you will never find the solution. So if you don't find the cause, the real cause, you will never be able to come up with a solution of a problem. Okay, so only by finding the cause of a problem, you can solve that problem. If you don't, you will keep chasing false causes and you will get nothing in the long run. Sometimes we explain our behavior in one way or another, but in fact, that's not the real explanation. And to give you a real example, not a hypothetical example, a real example, let's talk about Dr. Gerald Kane. Now, Dr. Gerald Kane is an American hypnotist. He's a psychiatrist and also a hypnotist. Hypnotist means someone specialized in hypnosis, and hypnosis is actually a condition when all your senses are open to suggestion, and your subconscious mind is wide open, and we can send a message to when you are in this condition, in a hypnotic condition, we can send messages to your subconscious to remain there, or we can even retrieve items from your subconscious in order to know why you are doing or you're behaving in a particular manner. So that's hypnosis. Many people think that hypnosis is when someone puts you to sleep. Unfortunately, this is the false image that the media gave us on hypnosis. Hypnosis is, on the contrary, it's when all your senses are alert, and all your senses are very sharp. But because you are not doing anything, so people think that you are asleep, but you're not really asleep. On the contrary, you are more awake than in normal conditions. But because you're not moving, so people think that you are asleep. That's the misconception that the media, like the movie industry, gave us about hypnosis. So let me give you this true story that Dr. Kane encountered in his clinics with one of the patients. So he says one day there was a woman who walked into his clinic, and she was suffering from a problem, overeating. She overate. She ate a lot, and she was gaining weight very fast. And she said, I tried everything. I tried diet, I tried working out, exercising, physical exercises. I tried medication, but it's not working. I love food and I want to stop this. And he asked her a simple question. He said, why do you overeat? And she said, because I love food. I enjoy eating. So this is the reason she gave. She thought she loved food because she thought she overate because she loved food. She enjoys food, you know. After talking to her, after having a conversation with her in his clinic, he realized that, you know, she's not the kind of woman who enjoys food, um, because her personality just doesn't fit in with this kind of woman. Uh, she was mature, intellectual, and she knows exactly what she's doing. She's um, logical, you know, she has logical thinking. And he soon realized that there must be something else. And the real reason, the real motives are lurking there, hiding in her unconscious mind, in her subconscious, actually. So he put her under hypnosis. He said, I'm going to hypnotize you now. He hypnotized her, and there were several sessions, and finally he discovered the true reason why she's overeating. He found out that something she never told him, in fact, but after putting her under hypnosis, he knew it, but she never talked about it. Uh, Years ago, you know, she was raped, and it was a very shocking experience at that time. Uh, she's very attractive, very beautiful, and she was raped, and because she was shocked, her unconscious mind decided to do something. Not she. She didn't decide to do anything. She was shocked. But her unconscious mind decided to do something, working on the protection or safety principle, because one of the drives in the unconscious is the quest for safety. So her unconscious mind programmed her to eat a lot. It was like this. Her unconscious mind told her, listen, you were raped because you're very beautiful. So in order to protect you from men, you have to eat and gain weight and become fat. Then no man will desire you and no man will rape you again. In other words, if you're ugly, nobody will rape you. This is what her unconscious mind told her. And she started overeating. She thought she's overeating because she enjoys food and loves food, but in fact, this was not the reason. So when Dr. Kane discovered this about this woman, he decided to fix the problem. So he distracted her CF factor, and we'll talk about that later. Uh, he dis he distracted her CF factor and then sent a message to her uh, unconscious, which was she didn't know that there was a message being sent to her unconscious because her her conscious mind, her CF, was distracted, and he told her, "Listen, you are a very good woman, intellectual woman, and you are beautiful, and all what you're doing now, overeating, is because of an incident that took place in your past. But this will never happen again. I want you to stop overeating, but at the same time, I don't want you to go on a diet. I want you to eat healthy food, enjoy your life. And then she went home, and suddenly she started living a normal life, not overeating. She went back to her life before that raping, and everything was okay. And he said, one day I was on the beach, and there was this beautiful woman who came to me, and she said, "Hi, doctor, do you remember me?" He said, "No, I don't remember you." She was with her husband. She got married, and she said, "You are the hypnotist who treated me. You remember I was the one who overate." He said, "Oh, I see. Right, you're completely different, And she said, "Thanks to you, my life is back to normal." And so this is the story of this woman that uh, who walked into Dr. Kane's clinic, and this story is, of course, a real story, and it shows. I mean, what's the significance of this story in this session? It shows us that there are many times in life we we do things and we think we know the reason why we are doing it, but in fact we are wrong. The real reason, the real motives are inside our unconscious and we don't know about them. And we can never solve the problem unless we know those true motives. Do you know, this woman tried everything to stop overeating? She tried diet, she tried medication, she tried exercising, she tried therapy. It didn't work. Why? Because she was dealing with the wrong reasons. But once the real motive was discovered, the treatment was very easy. It was just a few sentences which were planted in her subconscious mind. That was the treatment. Very simple treatment. So if you know the motive for your behavior, the true one, you will the solution will be very easy. But if you keep chasing false motives, you will never arrive at a solution. So let's go back to Freud's model of the human mind. Freud says that the human mind is divided into two major sections: the conscious and the unconscious. The conscious is your awareness. Your awareness. It means what you know or what you think you know. By the way, it's not just the conscious is not just what you know, it's what you think you know. Because there are many things, there are many times when you think you know something, but in fact it's not. But it's what you know, what you're aware of. So for example, if I say, "What are you doing now?" you will say, "Now I am sitting having a session in this course." So you know this. It's your aware, you are aware of this fact. This is what you know. Now what you know could be wrong or right. It could be correct or not. It doesn't really matter if it's right or not. But what matters is you are aware of it. You know it. So if I say now, "Where is your friend?" You'll say, "My friend is sitting in his house having lunch." This is what you tell me. This is what you think. Well, maybe that's right. Maybe it's not. Maybe your friend now is not in his house at all, is outdoors shopping, for example. We don't know. But you think you know. So this is what you think. Therefore, what you think is part of your conscious mind. And then we have the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is where it's a reservoir, like a warehouse of all your motives, desires, instincts, drives, the mental processes that take place, the hidden mental processes that take place. This is the seat of all your drives and instincts. And Freud gives the analogy of the iceberg to illustrate his theory of his model of the mind. You remember, just like Plato, when he wanted to explain the idea of mimesis, imitation, he gave us the example of the cave, the simile of the cave, to make it easy for us to understand the complicated concept of mimesis. So Freud, to make it easy for us to understand what the human mind is, he gives us this example of the iceberg. So this example of the iceberg is not mine. It's Freud's example. He says the human mind is like a big iceberg. And the iceberg, part of it is above the surface of the water, and the other part is under the surface of the water. The part which is above the surface of the water is the part which is visible. We can see that part. We can see it. But the part which is submerged under the surface of the water is the invisible part. We cannot see it. And it is the largest part. The part which is above the surface of the water is only, the tip of the iceberg, is only the tip of the iceberg. But the largest part is under the surface. So is this model clear? The model of the human mind according to Sigmund Freud? Do you have any questions about this model? Okay, if it's clear, great. So let's move on now. Now, it's more complicated than that. We started with two parts because these are the major parts. But in fact, there are more divisions, like we have the preconscious. So now let's add this to our list. We have the conscious mind. I explained the conscious. We have the unconscious mind, and we have the preconscious mind. Now, the preconscious mind is sandwiched between the two. It's like that's the smallest part, but it is between the conscious and the unconscious. And this is where our memories are. This is the memory part of our mind. Whenever you want to save information or data, you send it to your preconscious mind. So now we have the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the preconscious mind. And it's a bit, it's still more complicated than that, but this is a good start. Let's move on to the next part. Freud says that the unconscious mind is divided into three parts. So there are subdivisions in the unconscious mind. They are the id, the ego, and the superego. The id, the ego, and the superego. Now the id is the part of the unconscious mind which contains all your instincts, drives. Freud calls them drives. We call them instincts. He calls them drives. And they are born with us. They are hardwired in our mind. We don't acquire them after birth. They are with us. They come with us when we are born. Nobody puts them there. They're already there. And you cannot take them away. You know, they're part and parcel of our mind. And drives like what? Drives like hunger, thirst, the friendship, need for protection or safety, reproduction, the need to sleep, for example, is a drive. So these are drives. And these drives want to be satisfied. Because if you don't satisfy them, your life will be in danger. And you can think of these drives, I mean, you can think of the id as a large prison. You can think of the id as a large prison, which contains, you know, many prisoners. Every prisoner represents one drive. One prisoner represents hunger, another represents thirst, etc. And the word id in Latin means it in English. In English, we say it. In Latin, it's id. That's where the name comes from. So it operates on the pleasure principle because it wants to be satisfied. The id wants to be satisfied no matter what, just like prisoners. If you ask any prisoner, what do you want from life? He says, I want to be free. Right? That's the dream of every prisoner. Every prisoner's dream is to be free. So every dream of every instinct or drive is to be satisfied. This is the id. This model reminds us of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is always given to students of business administration. All students who are taking business administration, studying in the business college, they have to know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. These are the basic needs that all human beings have. They remind us of Freud's id, almost the same. And business students take this model, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in order to understand customer behavior. Because, you know, what's the aim of every businessman? It's to attract customers. So if you know their needs, you know how to attract them. So the first part of the unconscious mind is the id. The other part is the superego. The superego is the opposite of the id. So it is the unconscious part. Yes, it's the unconscious part. No, it doesn't. Yes, and it's illogical. Yeah, it doesn't operate on logic. Logic doesn't work with the id. The id just wants to be happy, to be satisfied, to be pleased. Doesn't care where, when, with whom. Doesn't really care. It only wants to be satisfied. If you think of the id as a devil, if you think of the id as the devil, then you can think of the superego as the angel. The superego is the noble part in us. It's like an angel. It has all the, let's say, it's the human side of us. It's the noble, spiritual part of us. For example, self-sacrifice, generosity, kindness, purity, honesty, religion, all the religious values are represented by the superego. And then we have the ego, the third part. We have the id, the superego, and the ego. And the ego in Latin, the word ego in Latin means I, the personal pronoun I. It it functions. This is the logical part. This is the logical part. It operates on the reality principle. And its job is just like a traffic officer. A traffic officer who regulates traffic, who keeps everything in order. Its job, the job or the task of the ego, is to strike a balance between the id and the superego. Because the id and the superego are always fighting against each other. But the ego is to make a balance between them. The ego should not let them fight. The ego should control both of them, regulate them. Yes, it stands in the middle to regulate them. Very good. So there's always a conflict between the id and the superego, just like a boxing match. And every boxing match, there's a referee, right? A referee who makes sure that they are following the rules. They should, by the way, they should both follow the rules. The id and the superego should follow the rules. Who makes sure that they are following the rules of the fight? The ego. So the absence of the ego is just like you go to a boxing match. There are two boxers. They are fighting without a referee. What's going to happen? They'll kill each other, right? There should be a referee to stop them when they break the rules. And just like, imagine you go to a football match. Every football match, in every football match, there are two teams, two football teams. But there must be a referee, because without a referee, the game will turn into a chaos. So the ego is just like that referee who makes sure that they are following the rules. In the past, before Freud, as I said, before Freud, there was no psychology as a science, and nobody knew about the unconscious. Nobody knew about the id and the ego and the superego. So people referred to psychology as human nature. And whenever there was a conflict in your mind, when you can't make up your mind about something, you have an inner conflict between something and something else. People used to say, this is the good angel and the bad angel are whispering into your ears. Like two angels are sitting on your shoulders. One of them is the good angel, the other is the evil angel, and they are whispering into your ears. This is how people before Freud thought about inner conflicts of the mind. Freud gave us another model for this conflict, which is the conflict between the the superego and the id, and the ego functioning as the regulator. So imagine what the streets would look like without a traffic police officer. It would turn into a chaos. So do you see how the ego is very important? The function of the ego is very important in our life. So this is just to illustrate that the id, is based on instincts, and these instincts, if you give them freedom, they will just want satisfaction. The superego is the morality principle in us, and the ego is the reality principle, or the logical principle in us. It always tries to strike this balance between the two opposites, the superego and the id. Great. Let me give you a situation of how this could work in life. Let's say that you have a meeting, and the meeting is 2 hours long. You are working in a company. Let's imagine that you're working in a company and your manager calls for a meeting. So you and the other employees, your colleagues, are sitting with the manager having a meeting. It's the meeting lasts 2 hours. In the middle of the meeting, you feel hungry. And you have a sandwich in your bag, and your bag is with you at the meeting, and you want to eat, of course. What's working here? The id, right? The id now is at work. One of the instincts, one of the drives in the id wants to be satisfied. It's the hunger drive. So the id says, come on, eat. You're hungry. I want to eat. The id says, I want to eat. The superego says, what are you talking about? It's not ethical, moral to eat right now. This is against the rules. What will people say about you? What will the manager say about you? You should act nobly. And this is what the superego says don't eat, and it says eat. So this is just an example, but in fact, this is what happens every day to us. Not necessarily a meeting, but this is what happens to us all the time. So we have to make up our mind. Now, the it says, come on, eat. And the superego says, don't eat. And there's this conflict between them. Who's going to interfere to regulate this conflict? The ego. The ego will look at the superego, will say, listen, you're right. It's going to create a very bad impression. And the ego will then look at the id and say, listen, you're right. I know eating is very important because, because if we don't eat, we're going to starve to death. But wait for 1 hour. 1 hour is left, so please wait. Be patient, and then when the meeting is over, you can eat as much as you want. So they will both be happy. And the result is you will sit and wait. But suppose that 1 hour passes, one more hour passes, and your manager says, oh, we have more issues to discuss. So we will continue this meeting. And then he asks for 2 more hours. Now you waited for 1 hour thinking that the meeting will be over, but it's not. Your manager says we need more time. Now 4 hours passed without food. Here the ego will interfere again. Will say to the ego, listen, you promised that's going to be 1 hour. Now it's 4 hours. So what are we going to do? I want to eat. And the ego will say, okay, you're right. Now, what are we going to do? You can't eat in the middle of the meeting. So the solution here, the ego will decide to ask for permission. So you raise your hand, you say, can we have a break? Your manager will say, no break. Now, this is a problem. The ego is getting, the id is getting impatient. Now, if this lasts for a long time, you're going to ask for permission, like, can I leave? Your boss will say, no, you cannot leave. And then there is a point which is called in psychology a threshold. Now, a threshold is when your patience snaps. A threshold is when the ego cannot satisfy either the superego or the id. So the ego will decide to let one of them have his way. This is called the threshold, and at the threshold point, your patience snaps. So there will be a time when you decide to grab the sandwich and start eating, whether your manager likes it or not. Why? Because here your health is in danger. Now, when life is in danger, the ego always when life is in danger, when your life is in danger, your ego will always let the id win. See, even the ego will favor the id if your life is in danger. So this is actually what happens in our human mind. You know, the human mind when we face such situations which trigger a conflict between the id and the superego. And this is called, by the way, defense mechanism. This strategy is called defense mechanism. So defense mechanism is when your mind decides to take action in order to defend your health, your mental health, or even physical health. Sometimes we suffer from a problem. So in some people, the ego is very weak. In some people, the ego, the ego should be very strong in order to control this conflict between the id and the superego. But sometimes sometimes the ego is very weak. So sometimes you see a football match in which the referee has a very weak personality. Now, when the referee in a football match has a weak personality, is not decisive, cannot decide, changes his mind from time to time, again, the game will turn into a chaos. The ego is like a judge, and a judge should have a very strong personality and decisive, should not hesitate, to administer justice. If our ego is weak, then the id and the superego will will have their way. So when your ego is very weak and cannot decide, then one of them will be overactive. Either the id will be overactive or the superego will be overactive, because the ego is very weak and cannot control the situation. So when you're examining people around you, your friends, always ask what's overactive in their mind. Is it the id or the superego which is overactive? Is the ego malfunctioning? Sometimes is their ego lenient, malfunctional? If your id is overactive, it's going to give you a monster. You will find a monster. If your superego is overactive, then you will turn into an angel. Here is an example of people whose superego is overactive, like Mother Teresa or Gandhi. These people, the superego is overactive. And here's an example of people from history whose id is overactive. People like Jack the Ripper, Al Capone and Pablo Escobar. These are killers. These are gangsters, mafia leaders. You know, this is where their id is overactive. Okay. But by the way, I mean, according to Freud, both cases are not healthy. See, it's like, you know, if you ask Freud, like, is this healthy? These people, are they healthy? Freud will say, no, they are not healthy. Of course, they're not healthy. Their id is in control, is overactive. But if you ask Freud, are these people healthy, mentally healthy, psychologically speaking, healthy, like Gandhi and Mother Teresa? Freud will say no, they are not healthy. According to Freud, they do not have a healthy mind. Even Gandhi and Mother Teresa. You will ask Freud why. Freud will tell you because a healthy person is a person where there's balance. You know, there's a balance between the id and the superego. None of them is overactive. When the superego is overactive or the id is overactive, there is no balance. And when there is no balance, there is no mental health. So that's how Freud thinks of mental health. Mental health lies in stability and equilibrium, a balance between the two. And to create a balance between the two, your ego must be strong. And in all these people, the ego is weak, and therefore one of the players, the id or the superego, will win, which is always win, which is not right. There is no balance. Now, according to Freud, you see, there are terms you have to master, you have to know. The first term is satisfaction. Satisfaction is when the drives in the id are satisfied. So when you feel hungry, you eat. It means you're satisfied. Hunger drive is satisfied. When you feel thirsty, you drink. When you drink water, it means you have satisfied your thirst drive. When you feel sleepy and you go to bed to sleep, then you have satisfied your sleep drive, your instinct to sleep. And it's very easy to satisfy these drives because we are not taught how to satisfy our drives. These drives are built in us. So we know how to satisfy them. Nobody teaches us how to. Nobody says, well, I don't know how to drink water, teach me. Or I feel hungry, but I don't know how to eat, teach me how to eat. Or I need to sleep, but can you please teach me how to sleep? Nobody teaches you how to sleep. Babies sleep. Nobody teaches a baby how to sleep. These are instincts. They are not skills. They're not like driving a car or riding a bicycle or swimming. Swimming is a skill. We need to be trained to swim. It's not an instinct. In human beings, swimming is a skill, not an instinct. We have to learn. But in fish, swimming is an instinct. Nobody teaches a fish how to swim. So these drives need to be satisfied, and it's very easy to satisfy them because nobody needs to learn how to satisfy them. The opposite of satisfaction is frustration. Again, it's a psychological term. Frustration is the opposite of satisfaction. It means you block these drives. You don't satisfy them. So you feel thirsty, but you don't drink water. This is not satisfaction. This is the opposite. It's frustration. Now, there are two types of frustration. either environmentally imposed or self-imposed. Either you decide to block them, or or the environment blocks them for you. So if you want to eat and there is no food, this is environmentally imposed. If you want to eat but you don't want to eat, you decide not to eat, you block them, this is self-imposed frustration. An example of self-imposed frustration is the example I gave you, like when you're in the middle of a meeting and you decide, your ego decides not to eat now. This is self-imposed frustration. Now, there is no problem with frustration. We all face frustration. Frustration leads to discomfort, of course. When you frustrate a drive, you don't feel comfortable. It's called discomfort. The problem is when discomfort continues. When discomfort continues, it leads to neurosis. So, for example, here, imagine that you have a drive, and this drive needs to be satisfied now. Every drive needs to be satisfied as soon as possible. And then you're going to satisfy this drive. So there's no problem. You satisfied it. But imagine that you don't satisfy it. You don't satisfy this drive. There's frustration. And frustration, if frustration continues, it leads to discomfort. If this continues, it leads to neurosis. Now, neurosis is a mild disorder, and there's no problem with neurosis. I mean, you can fix it. Parents, for example, can fix neurosis in their children. But the problem, if neurosis continues, it will lead to what we call mental disorder. And when we reach this point of mental disorder, there will be a problem. Then we need a psychiatrist. Yeah, it might lead to breakdown. Freud says most of the problems we face now in our adult life can be traced back to our childhood. Most of the problems you face in adults are actually originated in their childhood years. And that's right. And this is why psychiatrists always try to go back to the past to see what happened in the past. Because what happened in the past to you at the personal level will spell your future and your adulthood. And a very good example is toilet training. Toilet training is when you train babies or children how to use the toilet. And this is a very important and sensitive period in the life of an individual, toilet training. Because sometimes some parents, unfortunately, if the child slips, for example, if their boy doesn't know how to use the toilet properly, slips or messes up or does something wrong, they start reprimanding him or shouting at him. And some parents may even beat him. And they don't know, in fact, what's going to happen. They think that they are correcting his behavior, fixing. On the contrary, they are ruining the child's future. They don't know that when they shout at the child during this period, toilet training period, this is going to destroy the child's future. And they should not, the only people they have to blame is themselves when this boy will grow up and become a criminal or something, a killer or a liar. And this is why many parents who believe in psychology, they some of them, what they do? They hire a professional toilet trainer for their children. They because they don't want to make mistakes during this period. Anyway, so this tells you how important childhood is in determining future behavior. And let me give you an example of how this works, these stages work. This kid is in class, and he wants to go to the bathroom, and his teacher says, not now, no, don't go to the bathroom. He'll say, okay, and he will wait. So what's happening here? One of the drives needs to be satisfied. And by the way, the ego in children is not strong. Ego grows with age. So don't expect the ego to regulate, strike a balance at this stage. No. So what happens is one of the drives is frustrated. When the teacher says no, this is frustration. So frustration leads to discomfort. It's okay, no problem. Discomfort is no problem because the class will be over and then he will go to the bathroom. But imagine that this discomfort continues. Every day the teacher tells the boy, no, don't go to the bathroom. This means continued discomfort. Now, continued discomfort will lead to neurosis. It means the child will develop a complex and will begin to hate this class and hate this teacher and hate this subject. For example, mathematics. The child will hate mathematics. And the parents will ask, why does he hate mathematics? They don't know the reason. The reason is because the teacher keeps denying. You will say it has nothing to do with it. Yes, but the rule of association rules here. Well, so this child will develop neurosis, but we said neurosis is a mild case of disorder. There's no problem. If the parents know what's going on, if they know, they can fix it. They can go to school and talk to the teacher. If the teacher still insists, the parents don't want this neurosis to continue because it might lead to disorder. So maybe they'll consider changing the school. Again, because of this teacher. So they'll fix the problem. But imagine that the parents don't know about this. Imagine that they know, but they don't care. For example, they know, the boy tells them, I want to go to bathroom and my teacher keeps telling me not to. They'll say, well, you can wait, so they don't care about it. If they don't care about it or they don't know about it, this neurosis will develop into mental disorder. If it reaches this stage, mental disorder, they can do nothing. Even changing the school will not fix the problem. In that case, they really need a specialist, a social worker, or a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist, not any psychiatrist, but a child psychiatrist who can interfere and fix this problem. But we hope that it's not going to reach it. And that's why, by the way, teachers should be trained, especially in primary school. Primary school teachers should know something, at least the basics of child psychology and psychology in general. And that's why PTA meetings are very important, because you have to know what's going on at school. Maybe your child is facing a problem and you don't know it. PTA meetings are very important. Okay, so subliminal psychology is very important. This is a very good book in subliminal psychology, and you have to know also how literature, art, the media, advertising, they can subconsciously, control your mind. Subliminal messages are messages sent to your subconscious mind in order to procure an action on your part. Some subliminal messages are okay. They are allowed. Like FedEx is an American company, shipping company, famous one, and they use subliminals in their logo. So look at this logo, for example. There is a subliminal message sent to your subconscious mind, and you don't know it. You don't feel it, and you don't know it unless someone points it out to you. So, for example, in their logo, I'm sure you've looked at this logo. So where is the subliminal message? It is actually in this arrow. This arrow is a subliminal message to invite your subconscious mind to act. You know, an arrow is a symbol of direction, and it's pointing to the right. It means take action. So this is a subliminal message, but it's allowed. There's no problem with this subliminal message. Some subliminal messages are very, very, bad, and I can't give you examples here because they're not suitable, and they are banned. That's why many logos are banned, you know, because of their subliminal messages. But some subliminal messages are okay, no problem, like the FedEx logo. No problem with this subliminal message. It's just asking you to act. That's it. We see something, but we don't know that we see it. And that's why I recommend this book, Subliminal Psychology. Yeah. Literature can also contain subliminals, by the way, art, literature. Another application of subliminals and the use of the unconscious and the subconscious is learning languages while you're asleep. There are now courses in different languages, courses that teach you a language while you are asleep. Okay, so these are applications of Freud's theory of psychoanalysis. Thank you very much for joining me today, and have a great day, and I'll be seeing you next week.